progress bar to load and we'll get started really, really soon. All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to Active Allyship and Tech with Design Buddies. In light of all the recent events happening to the Black and Asian community, it's super important for us to really advocate for our minority buddies and just support each other in these times just happening in history. And Design Buddies is an inclusive design community, so we welcome anybody interested in design, whether like whatever experience you come from or whatever role in tech you play, if you're interested in design, or whatever group you come, whatever you identify as, anybody is welcome in Design Buddies. And we're so excited to have Marlon, Brian, Cassie, and Rob here with us, both diversity, equity, and inclusion leaders in tech, joining us today on a panel discussion and active allyship in tech. And for the format of this event, we'll have some prefab questions. We'll go with a round of intros first and some prefab questions led by Natasha. Natasha is also a mentor on Design Buddies and ADP List. She's been on a few of our events as well, so you should definitely check that out on our YouTube channel. And Alistair will be leading our audience questions on Slido. And anytime you have a question that comes up during this event, make sure to put it in on Slido, just because sometimes we get a lot of questions. So we want you guys to upvote each other's questions on the questions you really want to ask live in the panel. And so Alistair will be helping moderate that. And Alistair is also a mentor on Design Buddies and ADP List and has been on our Game UX events as well. So definitely check those out. We're super grateful to have Natasha and Alistair also leading this event and helping us facilitate discussion today. And at the end, in their last 2 minutes at 5:58 p.m. Pacific, we'll be doing a group photo in a wave for Instagram story, just like all the other Design Buddies events. And lastly, you're welcome to turn on your camera if you would like to join us on stage. With that, we'll start with intro. So feel free, we'll go in alphabetical order. So Brian, Cassie, Marlon, and Rob, about your journey into allyship and just about your background. And with that, I'll hand it off to Brian.
Thank you, Grace. Hi, everyone. It's great to meet you all. And thanks for being here, and to Grace and Natasha for inviting me to speak on this panel. Also, a happy belated birthday to Design Buddies. I'm Brian. My pronouns are he, him, his. 25 years ago, I immigrated to Vancouver, Canada. And prior to that, I was born and raised in Hong Kong. I work for Electronic Arts with everyone else here on the panel, and all my views and opinions are my own. So what I do at EA, I'm a servant leader and development director for our EA sports games. Currently work on FIFA, and previously I worked on UFC, NHL, Madden, and others. I've also worked in Central Tech, working on several initiatives and services, and I had a short stint in marketing operations as well. So as a development director, I support a team of software engineers, artists, game designers, experienced designers, of course, product owners, content producers, quality assurance, central tech partners, marketing, community, and many others to deliver products from our concept phase to launch to live service. In about 2 weeks, I will be at EA for 17 years. I'm also the board chair for our Global Asians and Pacific Islander ERG, named Aspire. And I want to give a quick shout out to many of the passionate and talented leaders within EA, driving our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy across the company, and also within our games and across the industry and our community as well. And some of those leaders are on this panel right now. I'm very passionate about giving back to our communities and uplifting and advocating talent and people and aspiring leaders, especially those in underrepresented or marginalized cohorts. I want to take a minute and just touch on yesterday's trial verdict for the George Floyd murder. The guilty on all counts verdict is a win for accountability for the singular case of the murder of George Floyd, but it does not make up or serve justice for many other deaths by police brutality and centuries of oppression and injustices to Black people. Real justice would have resulted in the trial and verdict not taking a full year to complete, and many others are still ongoing. So remember, the trials of the other policemen who were involved in that murder are up and coming. Real justice as well would be no lives lost to police brutality and violence towards our Black brothers and sisters, and much, much more. And real justice would have had George Floyd and many others still with us today. So while I'm holding the space, I would like to invite you all to join me in a moment of silence to honor George Floyd's life and all the lives lost in the past few weeks, for Ma'Khia Bryant, for Daunte Wright, for the Indianapolis, Boulder, Atlanta, and many other shooting victims, and the countless of victims of systemic racism and social injustice. So please, let's take a moment of silence right now. Thank you. Please look up the George Floyd Memorial Foundation to learn more and engage in some of the initiatives that are happening. I'm very honored to be part of this panel, and let's just keep remembering that we are part of one larger human community. We stand in solidarity with the Black community, the Asian community, the Brown community, and our LGBTQIA2S+ community to keep fighting for justice, equality, and most importantly, equity. All right, now I yield the mic to Cassie.
Thank you, Ryan, for that. That was great. Hi, everyone. My name is Cassie Richardson. Marlon and I are not actual cousins, but we refer to each other as cousins all the time. I was born and raised in the Northeast in Jersey and came down to school at University of Central Florida, go Knights, for a film and TV MBA, and actually went back to school for a business MBA. I am a project manager. I've been with EA coming up on 5 years now, and have made the shift from project to product. Work with designers a lot, have filled a designer role in the past in the work that I do, and appreciate all of you who are out there doing great work. I am part of the BEAT team at EA, which is the Black EA team, which is our Black and African-American ERG. I'm the global comms lead for that, and I'm excited to be here to talk about all things allyship and how to be an active ally.
Is it me next? Oh, there, obviously we have the same last name. So my cousin, Cassie, who's not related to me, I'm Marlon Richardson. I'm based in the Bay Area, but I grew up in Georgia, so all the way on the other side of the United States. I joined EA a little over a year ago. I actually started working at the company under the pandemic. Been to the office a couple of times before I was an employee. And so I got to know all these folks and I guess in the new way we work now, virtually. It's been a good experience. It's also been a great way. I think that there's something about when you work with folks this way, virtually, it's a little bit more equal. It's something about that. And I think that people felt a lot more. What really, the most impactful thing for me that happened last year was watching how the whole world felt like there was a lot of injustice with the way, mostly Black and Latino folks are targeted by law enforcement and without a lot of recourse. And seeing protests all over the world really made me feel like things were going to be different. And maybe I don't have to always worry about perceived whenever I'm doing anything that's not inside of my house. And so that's why I like to get involved in causes that have to do with allyship, because some of the best things you can do is simply tell your story, encourage other people to tell their story. And that's what we've done. And as a leader working at EA, I've worked as the director of experience design for IT. And I've encouraged my team to get involved, and they responded very strongly, getting involved with all the programs here that have to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion, which makes me proud and makes me happy. And they also allow me to help whenever they need it. So that's my story, and I'll cede it to the next person because I forgot the list that Grace just told me.
Hi, everyone. So Rob Barron, pronoun he, him. Excited to be here. Thanks for the honor to come and speak. My journey, kind of interesting, but a lot of it has to stem through my white privilege that I have had and I do recognize. So I'll start at the end point, which is I'm an operational leader in one of the mobile groups within electronic arts. And as our legal team said, please make sure that this is just my opinions and not EA's opinions. So I can tick that off the box. But in all fairness, my passion right now is in recognizing where I've got to. It's been because of my color, because of being male, a lot of that has enabled me to get to where I am. And I think in the position I'm in this last year in particular, through other people on this panel and others where I've spoken to, I've really come to a point where I'm like, wow, I'm in a position where I can influence change within the organization, within the team, within the culture. So a lot of what I'm doing at this point when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusivity, and just helping others is empowering the team that I partner with. Brian used the comment as a servant leader, and I believe in that very strongly. But how do I help the team really have a voice? How do I help everybody from this pandemic point of view, working remotely, be democratized through Zoom? So everyone's got an opportunity to speak and be heard and bring themselves to work. And that's been a big passion of mine. I've seen it firsthand where just providing that mic to somebody and giving them an opportunity creates massive impact and results where in the past maybe that person didn't get an opportunity to speak. So I've seen it firsthand. I'm really motivated to just help wherever I can as an ally. I was born, going back to kind of the beginning now, I was born in Zimbabwe in Africa. I lived there till I was early teenager, moved across to South Africa. I was very fortunate to be in a Jewish private school. But I was there at a time with a massive transformation with the freedom of Nelson Mandela and the legitimizing of the ANC, and just seeing that transition, which was an amazing period. I then was lucky and fortunate to go live in the UK for many years, and I've now been in Canada for the last 20 years. So if you add that all together, I'm pretty elderly. I shouldn't actually put that all together like that. But jokes aside, all good. I'm very excited. Been with EA about 13 years now and still learning a lot all the time. So hopefully that didn't take too long, but that's me.
So thank you all so much for your intro and sharing your background in allyship. And with that, we'll kick it off to Natasha for hosting the prefab questions.
Thank you, Grace. And, thank you, our panelists, for joining us. It is an issue that, Grace, Alistair, and I are deeply care about. So maybe a little bit of a background on why we decided to put this on, to give back to community, because the three of us, one way or another, were connected via like design buddies or ADP lists. So it was kind of like a serendipitous meeting that we had, and we just started sharing about the recent Asian violence, and we were like, there's like something that we gotta do here. And we started like putting out calls. We started asking everybody, we started asking Marlon. Fun fact, Marlon is my manager. So it's almost like it's so easy to ask Marlon because like we talk to him every day. So then I kind of like grew bigger and bigger and reached out to Cassie, to Brian and Rob, who have been really supportive and very, very lucky to have them with us over here right now. So I think I'd like to kick off maybe the first question to our panelists with like, can you maybe tell us a little bit about what does DE&I mean to you and how important it is to you at work? Maybe you can start with Cassie.
Sure, I can take that. So for me, it's kind of twofold. I think the biggest thing, of course, for DE&I is feeling safe and comfortable at work, that you can be yourself and not worry about any sort of negative impacts to your job or your career as a result of just being you, from the way you look to the way you talk to the person that you are and the personality that you bring. For me personally, I think also ERG, or Employee Resource Group involvement, has been a key factor of my career, even before EA. Working in that space, meeting people, really having a community of members and allies from those different groups has given me a bit of a family at companies, and has really made me feel like I can explore being my own personality. Because I think a lot of the times, as an underrepresented group, we have to show up to work and put on a face, put on a facade, act a little bit. And it's always great to join a call or a meeting with members of the group that I'm in, and to feel like I can kind of let my hair down and be myself. And it's just a really nice release to be able to connect with folks. Today, for example, we had just a coffee talk with Beat, and we were talking about a lot of different things, mainly, of course, the verdict last week, but the verdict yesterday. But it's just really great to be able to have that community inside of work as well as, outside.
Well, I can chime in on that. Those are all great points. And so I'm just going to touch on a few different things there. For me, diversity, early in my career, when I started managing, I wrote down these traits, and these are the things that I want to see. And, and then I wrote the job descriptions out, and, I let somebody see it. I let my wife see it. And she was like, "Oh, you're looking for yourself, right?" And that's not diverse. Looking for yourself, because, when you're many times because you know yourself so well, you kind of, all these things I need to work on, they're not that important. And these things I'm really good at, let's put those here. But the reality is that we're all a little bit different. We all have some strong points. Diversity to me means, it means making sure that there's opportunities for folks of different groups, especially marginalized group, to have an opportunity. And so, where does that start? When you're looking for applicants, it means ensuring that you see that range. Even if you love somebody, you make sure you see that range of folks, right? Especially the marginalized group. So, why a business case for this also is that we all know the data points to diverse teams outperforming homogenous teams. Doesn't matter what that homogeneity is, because you need that different life experiences brought to the table. And in UX, it's especially true. The way you go about solving problems as a experienced designer, your life experiences have a lot to do with it. I feel like marginalized groups, it might come a little easier simply because you might have spent a lot more time wondering how you're perceived or planning, around that. And UX is a lot about having empathy for the user and trying to be who that other person is. And to go along with what Cassie was saying about putting on a face. But if you can add some empathy to it, that goes a long way in understanding kind of how we work. Now, with equity, equity for me is real simple. It's trying to get that pay for everybody similarly, and not have these weird, I call it a tax, a minority tax or gender tax, on folks. Because maybe there's so few of them in the industry because they're not interviewed as often, that as a manager, I've seen some managers feel like they were exposed simply by having one of those folks that were not a part of that. There's usually people who look like this in that role, even if that person is high performing. And in inclusion, to me, you have, for me, a good mix is to not have the same voice, right? Me personally, I don't have trouble expressing my thoughts in a group, but I have super talented people that isn't their strongest point, or they might wait until they gather a lot more information in, and then they have something to say. And it's usually really, really good, right? And so trying to make room for all the different types of voices, that's how it manifests itself more on my team, and not just, fortunately for me in my career, it hasn't been as much of a problem in the industry where there's a lot of pushback if somebody doesn't hit that, white Protestant male or something, right? They could be transgender and Latino or any mix. That's hope in my last 20 years, that's something that went over really well in design. And so it's not been a problem in terms of acceptance. And so I focus more on the other parts of inclusion there, which is the voices in the room themselves, making sure my team looks for opportunities to give a voice to someone else, even if it means reminding them, hey, that, this solution here you talked about the other day to me, I think, could you, call them out in the room and say, give them an introduction so that other folks can see it. That's what I see it is ensuring that there's multiple voices on a team that can talk.
Thank you, Marlon. We'd love to hear from Brian and Rob.
Sounds good. So the question was, what does DEI mean to you and how important it is? To me, it means everything. To not weave diversity, equity, and inclusion into our daily lives and operations is, to me, not acceptable. In the workplace, I think DEI is still a fairly new concept for many companies. A little bit like how UX design was new about 10 to 15 years ago, right? Eric Toda, who is the global head of social marketing for Facebook, and in recent times, he's also a very prominent voice in the Asian American community, and also one of my personal inspirations. He spoke about this topic a couple weeks ago. He said something really interesting, which I'll paraphrase. So what Eric said is, for many companies, diversity used to mean hire more white women, right? And designate a mother's room in the office. Then it evolved into hire more Black employees. But none of these plans included things like, how do we support these women and Black employees and ensure they're being treated fairly and given the same opportunities as white men? And that is the equity piece. Right? Then the final piece here is inclusion, which is ensuring all marginalized communities are represented, including Asians, Latinx, Indigenous, neurodiverse, disabled, and of course, LGBTQIA2S+ employees. And to only look at one facet and not the others, to me, is really missing the mark, and it will not achieve true DEI. And without true DEI, as Cassie touched on as well, people cannot be their true authentic selves at work. Cassie touched on the need to put on masks or facades in order to perform in advance. And this just ends up feeding and perpetuating the system of inequality and injustice. It is not easy to thrive in that type of environment. And just to kind of paint a picture here, this is kind of what it's like. So imagine you're running a 100-yard dash in track, to use one of Grace's analogies. But you're running this 100-yard dash against other runners. But some of these people are starting way ahead of you, so they only have to run 50 yards. And then when you start running, you realize that your start line was actually moved back, so your distance is 200 yards. And then you discover you have hurdles and hoops to jump through at every 25 yards. Oh, and somehow if you end up winning the race, your medal isn't the proper medal, and you don't get the medal that's reserved for others. It doesn't sound good at all. So in the games industry, we are seeing exponential growth in probably the past 20 years with portable gaming devices like the smartphone, other handheld gaming devices. I think 1/3 of the world now is officially a gamer, which is, doing the math, it's about 2.5 billion people in the world. Right? And video games intersect the worlds of interactive entertainment, technology, design, and storytelling. So as game makers and game designers and experience designers, we absolutely have a big responsibility to shape how players see the world. I grew up playing video games, and I played a lot of Japanese RPGs like Final Fantasy, Dragon Ball, and characters and stories were very diverse. So I can't overstate how much the games I played influenced and shaped my perspectives as an adult and how I show up in the workplace. So I consider myself extremely fortunate to have been exposed to those types of content, and certainly something as a games industry we need to continue pushing.
Yeah, to add maybe something that hasn't been mentioned, I'll kind of go down the path of what I've been doing to maybe support it as a bit of an allyship approach, because I think everything all the other panelists mentioned are so powerful. I don't want to reiterate that. But in my role in my world, when it comes to these things, a big part is to make sure that everything we do is through that lens of diversity, equity, inclusion. So whether it's hiring, onboarding, meetings, everything we do, we need to kind of just keep reminding ourselves, are we considering it? So anytime we fall back on something that might be what was considered business as usual, even a few years back, we need to put that lens in and say, is this through the lens of diversity and inclusion and equality? Otherwise, you very comfortably fall back into what you felt might have been correct. And I think for me, it's been such an educational journey the last few years to be educated in what this means and how to try and support this. And instead of being quiet in a meeting and letting something go by that just didn't feel right, there's been a lot of now support and training and opportunities to call people in, right, to go and have that conversation afterwards and say, hey, do you know, or do you realize the impact of what you just did or didn't do? And I think that's super important as well as you go through that, because I think a lot of people might be trying the best. I certainly am trying my best, and I don't think I get it right all the time. And I do know I've asked a lot of people around me to please feel free to come to me and let me know, hey, Rob, you realize you did this. Maybe you could try this approach. And that becomes super powerful. So I think regardless of who you are, but if you feel something or you see something, I think be bold to find a way of communicating that back to somebody so they can learn. It doesn't have to be yourself. I know in our organization, there's multiple channels to go through. And I know in my team, I've asked people to feel free to come to me to help them in that regard as well.
So that is, I think most of our panelists actually answered my next question, which is what does active allyship mean to you? So like what you shared with me, Rob, that's definitely, pointed to me as active allyship. Like if you see something, call out something, find a way to bring it up and like talk to somebody about it. That to me is active allyship. And, to Cassie and Marlon, it's all about like, and also Brian, how do you enable so that people could come to work with their being comfortable to be their true selves, and even like creating voices for other voices in the workplace so that they can have visibility to tell their story or to have the same kind of opportunities. Is there anything else that, that I'm missing or anything that came to mind as I was like, sharing, grouping whatever that we just discussed in the short time here?
I would say it's a bit of a balancing act to be an active ally, right? Because on one end, you want to learn more, you want to be engaged, and so you feel like, oh, let me reach out to my coworker, let me talk about something that's happened, let me offer some advice or to try to bond and form some sort of relationship. And sometimes as an underrepresented person, we get approached by a lot of people when something big happens. Like around this time last year, a lot of people reached out to myself individually and other members of the BEAT employee resource group, wanting to get educated a bit on how they can help. And, we had to push back a little bit just because it does get a little exhausting, right? So I think to be an active ally, it's really to understand, when to engage and to also just be considerate of the fact that whoever you're talking to might be going through something, might be going through a lot. And just to be there to offer your support, a lot of the times is enough, right? And to just offer that encouragement, that safe space for that person to connect with you, I think is a great way to also be an ally and to take kind of that first step into active allyship.
So I wanted to call out something that I saw in the chat. I think it was probably gonna give inspiration for every one of us who wants to be an ally or just starting into active allyship. So Mary said she called out something at work and she was let go for it. Mary, do you maybe want to share a little bit about your situation? Only if you feel comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable, then we could probably discuss about what are the other ways we can maybe bring it up without it costing your job or something.
Oh, here we are. Yes, thank you. So it was exactly around this time last year, I was in a Zoom meeting at work, and it is global. So not only the New York office, but in California, Australia, and Asia, and Europe. It was the boss's birthday, and everyone it was encouraged for everyone to share pictures or fun pictures they had with the CEO, just to help bring up spirits. And we were meant to have a fun time, and somebody shared pictures of a Halloween party with 2 employees that currently work there. In not only one was in blackface, and the other was in Asian face. I refuse to say yellow face because I find that word offensive. And while the Zoom was going, I was the only one out of over 300 employees, because we were all muted, the only one to type, "Stop, that's not funny, why are you laughing?" Because while he was laughing when he showed the picture, there were other people laughing because everybody had their cameras on and you could see which employees were laughing. And after that meeting, it was announced that those employees would have training, sensitivity training. And I said, but it's not being insensitive or being biased, it's racist. And I felt as an executive assistant at that time that I could press upon them in an email how it's just at any company, those people would be fired. They would be let go. And they just wanted to hold on to these people so hard. And I said that you're looking at potential lawsuits. It's so uncomfortable. This is like the people who, report into these 2 gentlemen, like, how do you, they're Asian and Black. I wouldn't know how they feel. It's so gross. And I'm Puerto Rican. I'm, while I'm neither one of those groups, it does not matter for me because I looked at it and I was the only one out of all the employees that actually said something as opposed to just being silent. And because I made a big deal out of it, I deeply suspect that is the reason why I was let go. Better to, quiet me than, keep bringing up the point that it's inappropriate. And, I quoted a lot of scholarly articles on ways to have like diversity and inclusive programs at work. And that it should not be under HR. It should be something separate that is owned by the employees instead. And that it was just too much because, there's a lot of ego in the room.
Hey, Marie, thank you for speaking up. And I'll be blunt, I think they did you a favor. So if I worked for that company and that happened, I'd be the first one out the door.
I want to add something as well. Marie, thanks for sharing. I think part of the journey, just speaking for myself here, is you are in that situation years ahead in some regards, unfortunately, in some of the, let's just say, privileged white males, perhaps, that are in the leadership of these organizations. And some of them are going to try to hold on to it, and it's going to be unfair, and it's going to be really tough in this case that you've mentioned as well. I think what you did was brave and really an amazing stand to go forward with this. And I think that's complete allyship and standing up for it as well. All I can say is there's some companies that are changing quicker than others. And we're starting to see things moving in the right direction because of people being speaking up and saying it's not okay, and moving into organizations that feel the culture is right. And just to echo Brian's point, you know, when we start looking at different organizations and we look at different diversity, those companies who are able to hire and make it a comfortable place are going to be the ones that move forward so much better and stronger and healthier. But it's going to take time, unfortunately, for others to really come across. I just going back to the active allyship question around it, I know that I still have conversations with people that I used to say, these are good friends and family. And I'm like, holy shit. they're still using certain vocabulary and certain things. And I'm like, hang on, they haven't been on that journey that I've been on. And in some situations, they honestly don't realize how bad they're being. Now, in your case, I think it's quite blatant, so I don't want to compare the two. But I do want to say that's part of the active allyship is educating and taking the time and having the energy and having those conversations to let people understand, hey, that is not okay. And this is why it's not okay, and have the empathy and understand. So anyway, I just wanted to share a bit there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mary, for sharing that. That is, yeah, I'm really sorry that happened to you, but I do agree with both Brian and Rob that, you know, they probably did you a favor, to be honest. Like, I could see like how toxic that environment would be for, you know, someone like us, right? Because we are probably fighting against a big wall over there. So maybe I want to move us into a little bit of a different tangent. So many of us breathed a collective sigh of relief yesterday. You know I did. I'm pretty sure all of us did here. But like what Brian said, our work is not done. This is the first tiny step towards equality and justice. So my question to the panel is, what are the other ways you think minority groups can support each other as allies? Marlon?
I can answer that. You know, one of the most effective things that I guess a group that empower can do is that they can take a minority, break it into pieces, and then make them fight for the scraps. And, you know, the definition of a union is when those little groups get together, basically, and you know, kind of figure out what's in their best interest, and then have a seat at the table with those folks who are powerful. And so I would say is that we can't you know, get into absolutes. You know, we've seen the attacks against Asian people dramatically increase in the last year, right? All it takes is for a person in a powerful position to say some disparaging things, to take a volatile issue and say, these people are the cause of it. A minority, a small group, all Asians, everything classified in the Asian United States, all of it together is only 5% of the population, right? And so it's the smallest group that we have in terms of that's represented, that you can give a name to, one of the smallest groups we have. And so if you can get other minorities to attack that group, you know, it weakens the message completely, or other way around, you know. And I feel like what I liked is that this time that's not the case at all. The most marginalized folks immediately saw what, you know, banded together and demanded certain things. And we've seen the results of it. I mean, look at the representation we have in Congress and Biden's cabinet with all the different minority groups. That was purely pressure from a large, from not just, you know, the smallest group in the small group. It was really the whole. If you take all those small groups together, it's actually pretty formidable, right? If minorities in America feel like something is a certain way, that's actually the majority now, right? We're already in a majority minority in America if these groups look out for their the best interests of everyone in that sense. And we've seen it. Look at how many women we have in leadership roles. We have a Black guy that's an EPA, head of EPA. We have a Native American female who is a cabinet position as well. We have Asian people, you know, that it kind of, the timing with Asian people is kind of really magic, right? You got, look at all the Oscars, right? It all came together at once. All of this bad stuff has happened, and there's a spotlight on it. And now, you know, some of the things that were already in works, it kind of just adds to it. And no one can deny that. I would say, especially Asians have kind of been looked over in that sense. You know, what was the former president called it? The Chinese flu, during a period where everybody was freaking out about the coronavirus. And like, obviously, that's going to cause the effect that it did. But I think now, finally, everybody, a large amount of people see it, and maybe we're close enough now to see it change. And so I hope the lesson we all learn is that, hey, let's not look at every little difference we have and look at some of the, you know, let's look at the most important things, which is, are you safe? You know, do you feel safe? When I took an audit of my team after the last few headline defining attacks on agents, they all told me the precautions that they took, right? Or I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to do that unless I have this, right? Or I'm lucky I have a community that are associated with people that look like me around me, but still I'm going to send my husband to do that, right? That's sad, right? And that's people who live in an Asian community, you know, and they don't feel safe walking around people who just look like them because of some wacko who may not even get prosecuted, you know, for attacking any number of people. And so I hope now that the spotlight stays on long enough that we can see some more change in those areas, and that hopefully we can change these civil rights abuses all the way around, from women, different ethnic groups, and it's really just one thing that we're improving, and not you know, separate things.
If I may build on that too, Marlon, you spoke about that extremely well. I have a few pieces to tack on. So not all minority groups are equal, right? And as an Asian, I recognize that I have inherited privilege. A lot of my privilege is not something I've earned as a human. What I'm referring to here is the model minority myth, which is a concept that was created by a white sociologist in the 1960s, purposely with the intent to pit ethnic minorities against each other. And so what happened here is Asians were used as a wedge community. And the myth is the notion that Black failure and Asian success are not a result of inequities and racism, and that Asians have earned their perceived success in the Americas. Therefore, there is proof that the system does not oppress the Black community. And what this myth does is it allows a segment of white America to avoid any responsibility for addressing racism or the damage that it continues to inflict. And so I'm an immigrant, and a lot of Asians in the Americas are immigrants currently, but a lot of us landed in the Americas and inherited the racism and the system, and we didn't fully understand it. We didn't understand that the system never valued Black lives and the Asians were used as a shield, right? So as an Asian, it's up to me to recognize this myth and to really do that deep work and understand how our proximity and adjacency to whiteness was weaponized, right? And how we've perpetuated the current system. And of course, the injustice and inequities are much more pervasive for the Black communities than the Asians. So we have to do this deep work. And we need to do everything we can do to bridge these gaps so that we can truly stand in solidarity. Right, so Black liberation is also our liberation. And to answer that question too, how can minority groups support each other as allies? What I would say is we should all be checking our privilege, right? And if we have some privilege, leverage it, right? Leverage it by uplifting and celebrating and advocating and advancing everyone around you, even when they're not in the room, right? Share the stories. Use that privilege to bake larger pies so that more people can have bigger slices. Use that privilege to build larger tables and pull up more chairs for more people. And just do the real work, even if people aren't in the room with you. And I read somewhere as well, this is something I wanted to touch on. So allyship is not a verb. Sorry, allyship is a verb. It's not an adjective. Don't just talk about it, be about it.
Yeah, that was amazing, Brian and Marlon. I also want to protect our panelists, so I want to remind everybody that these are their views, and as what legal say, these are their views, and these are not views of EA. So I'm looking at the time here, and we're getting into deep conversations, really great ones. But I also want to give time to answer like questions that are being asked. So I am going to ask, sorry, I'm losing English. This is really funny. Hope I don't get to speak Indonesian live because that has happened before and nobody could understand me. So Alistair, would you like to maybe, moderate the next section of our chat?
Of course. I'm trying to keep it together here, getting like pretty emotional. All right, so the most voted question is from Sasha. They asked, apologies, how do you prevent ERGs from further burdening marginalized employees with labor, for example, being expected to educate the company as a whole? I'm gonna pass it to Cassie.
Yeah, so I was one of the founding members of our Black ERG at EA, and let me tell you, it's a lot of work. I'm going to be completely honest about that. Any way you slice it, no matter how much support you get. I think also just to kind of touch on the second question too, because they kind of go hand in hand around support and senior leadership. I think that is one of the key things to having an ERG or any sort of DE&I group or community within your company be successful, is having that senior leadership support, because you really do need to be able to push back, right? And to say, hey, like I need you to do the work. I need you to write these comms. I need you to plan a Black History Month and let us know how we can get involved. You can ask us for opinions, for guidance, for maybe putting on something that we're really passionate about. But, we do frankly all have day jobs. And even though we might be very passionate about this and want to bring that community and grow that community within our companies, it is a lot of work, both just professionally and mentally and emotionally, right? To have these sorts of conversations, especially in the last few years of what so many different groups have been going through. I think senior leaders come from a position of power and privilege. And just like the most active allies, they need to be the ones that are, I wouldn't say mandating the support of ERGs, but are actively encouraging it. We had a spades tournament within EA a couple times now, and we've had some of our C-suite actually play. They showed up in a way where they weren't there to make some big speech, or they weren't, giving some sort of like financial budget to the cause. They were there to really just have that fellowship. And I think having other members and allies and attendees see that from them and being able to interact with them on a more personal level is what has helped to grow our ERG even just over the last year. So I would encourage you to have frank conversations with your leaders if you can, and to express to them exactly what this question was. Like, hey, I don't want to be difficult, but I can't be the one speaking for everyone within my group, and I need that help, and be clear and concise in how they can help. And if they're supportive and they're engaged and a true ally, they'll step up and make those things happen.
I can quickly build on that too, Cassie. So our ERGs at EA, including mine, we aren't just about throwing cultural celebrations and having parties and getting people together and having fun. That's a big part of it, but we're also really focusing on building up leadership capabilities across our membership, and also developing things like racial literacy and awareness throughout our leadership teams. So we're really actively working on weaving DEI into our operations, from recruiting, performance reviews, to design and art reviews of our games, and to updating certain words in our code base and corporate lexicon, and how we do business with our partners as well. So there's definitely, it's very broad, the work that we're doing in the ERG space. And we do have executive support, and that makes a big difference.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian and Cassie. We'll take, I saw a question asked by Kelsey. I think that is pretty relevant to people looking for jobs. And let me read it right now. As someone who is currently job hunting, are there any specific questions I can ask to ID if a company knows how to support DEI? Any red flags to look for in their answers?
I think it's a really good opportunity when you're in an interview and they say, do you have any questions, to ask that, right? To ask, do you have any employee resource groups? Do you have a corporate social responsibility team? Things like that are, of course, a great starting point. For smaller companies, they might not have that and might be getting into that. So, maybe just talk about what career advancement looks like at that company, and to ask about diversity among senior leadership. I think that's always a good sign, because if they don't have that, usually the answer is how they're working to get towards that diversity at the top levels. And I think that's a great starting point.
Yeah, I would just ask the interviewer what inclusivity and diversity mean to them, and see what they come up with. Very often, when I'm interviewing, I wait right to the end to try and see if there's anything that hasn't been answered. But I start a lot of interviews with what's top of mind for those individuals. So I think you can even just look at the way an interview is approached. And is it all about just diving into you answering the questions, or is it giving you an opportunity to really interview the company that's looking to hire you, and do you feel it's a good fit? But I would say talk to as many people as you need to in that organization before you kind of accept the offer. Ask them, can I speak to other people? Can I speak to some female leaders if you happen to be a woman and you feel more comfortable around that? Is the panel that's interviewing you diverse? Do you see yourself in the people you're talking to, or do you feel comfortable? Just some things to kind of consider.
That's great. One thing I wanted to add to that is, when you're interviewing, you're also interviewing the company. I think it's a two-way street, and that is something, if the employer your company should value you as well. And I personally feel like you shouldn't, throw away your values, to work at a place. So, does Marlon want to say something?
Oh, I was gonna just add to go. You're absolutely agree with that. That's why referrals are so important. And you guys, everyone here, 83 people here, design buddies. This is a huge networking group. At some point, all of you guys are, I mean, most of you guys are young in your career, but like, talk to us in 3 years, right? The same, maybe there's all these members, you guys will be, in your career, some will be mid-level, but you'll all be working at all these different places and you know each other from here, and you can, talk about these things. You'll know you're doing the best thing for yourself by knowing other people in this industry that might happen to work at a place you're interested in. You can ask them, what's it like to be there? And also, it's true. It is, you're interviewing the company and the company's interviewing you. And they, as talent, talent is something that can be hired by any company that needs that talent. And so it's something that's a continuous thing. If you're, good at what you do, your company should work hard to ensure that you want to work there. And that includes making it an environment that allows you to grow and to have peace of mind and to help others, if you'd like, with their careers, and just have career growth. It's not that hard to do if it's a priority for the company, right? It's about valuing certain traits in managers, to be honest, and putting those above other traits as they look for management, because it's all about your manager, right? If your manager doesn't want you to be successful or isn't supportive of it, there's almost impossible for you to be, no matter how good you are what you do. It's not even a secret, right? But anybody who manages people knows this, that, and so what you should want and what you should expect is that I should get a manager that cares about my well-being, cares about the well-being of at least my teammates, and cares about my career growth, right? And does everything they can to have a supportive environment that people feel safe, that they can work in, and have an opportunity to be successful. That is not too much to ask. If you don't feel like that's what you're going to get, you probably shouldn't work there, and there are places that are working hard towards that goal. And so that's something you should ask about, right? If it's not brought up even before you talk to the hiring manager. And it's definitely one of the questions you should ask when you get your time to ask questions during interview questions of like, what type of ways do you provide those things that we just said, right? So that they have to tell you, right? And by the answers, it's one of those things, it's hit or miss. The folks who haven't thought about it, they'll say something that's along the lines, what Alistair just said, some crazy stuff, right? Or earlier, what did he say? Maternity rooms and, and hiring, we hired some Black people last year, we're good. Diversity, or we promoted a couple of females. Now we're good with that. I said, if you hear it along those lines, because if they haven't really thought it through, it'll sound something like that. You don't have to think twice about that opportunity, as something that you really want to get into.
And ask them what costumes they wear during their employee parties.
Gosh, right?
Yeah, it's totally not a joke. It is. It may sound like a joke, but it's totally not a joke. I know we're at time, but I see a question here that is really good on the chat. I wonder if we can go over a little bit, if that's okay with everybody. Perfect. So Jason asks, how do you navigate the feelings in inadequacy when you might have realized that you were a diversity hire? Jason, do you want to maybe jump up real quick into the stage?
Yeah, I can unmute you really quick if you want. If you don't want, let us know.
Yeah, totally. And then I can just read the rest of your question if you don't want to be on stage.
Sorry,
Okay.
can you guys hear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I go by Andrew, but essentially, yeah, no, how would you navigate the feelings of inadequacy when you might have realized that you were a diversity hire? In a sense, like in a position, I got hired and I was really grateful to get hired. So I started doing the job, etc. And I realized a few things, like people were a little bit like um, not too inclined to have the intern join certain things at the beginning, and then I sort of really had to wedge my way in there until like they were really comfortable with me. And later I realized like that after there was a bunch of diversity like events, etc., and I got invited to them, then I started thinking, I was just like, wait, like, am I the diversity hire? And then after that, like they had this whole panel. It's just like where they started filming diversity. They had people like, oh, I came from here, blah, 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 and I'm excited to work for here. And these are things. And they would do that for all the people that were from other countries, etc. And I got picked to do one of those. And then I realized at that point I was a diversity hire and why they were so like not inclined to like have me in the beginning. Um, and I felt like it gave me heavy imposter syndrome. What was it is like, did I get hired for my abilities or did I get hired for just because like I was the diversity, you know? Or and like how would companies?
I got one question for you. Did you feel supported though? Did you feel like your manager and people around you that, hey, they were supportive? You felt like they wanted you to be successful?
It was mixed feelings because at the beginning, it was more like they were like, okay, so this is who you're reporting to, etc. You just stay there, and then afterwards, like when I really like put myself out there and was like, hey, like I'd like to be part of this, and this, like they were more open to having me show up to things and gave me more pointers, and then they started supporting me. So like at the end of the day, it was a very good experience and I really enjoyed my time there. But like halfway through discovering like I was the diversity hire really sort of like sucked. If you don't mind me saying.
I would say look at it two ways. Like if you felt like they wanted to make sure you were successful, yes, and sometimes managers do they go through the motions and they want to fill check a box, but really judge them on how you get treated, I would say, because you know, for some of these folks, this is the only way they could do it. They're not totally, they can't totally accept critical feedback or look at themselves objectively and how they don't know that they favor talent that looks like them and talks like them. And they just, you know, when I worked at my last company, I tell this story sometimes, and it's about with engineers, we found that, you know, at this company, you had to, everybody who interviewed people, you filled out a form that was, you know, this was like a digital thing. It went into a system and it got, you know, the data got synthesized. But what they found is that when women got interviewed, on average, the women got, you know, let's say, essentially the women got asked something like 15 to 20 questions, with 80% of them being difficult questions. And then minority males got, you know, maybe that same thing, but like 15% less. But white males got less than 10 questions with maybe up to 3 difficult questions. Same interview, right? So the bar was lowered, right? For, you know, for the folks who look like the people who are interviewing them. And it was only through the data that it was exposed. And these folks were like, hey, you know, this is why you need to discuss with your team what questions are going to get asked, and then you decide which questions get asked, and then you go ask these, they ask those, and then that's how it's equal, right? And when the same group of folks did that, and they received a good mix of people, you know, the data showed that since minorities and especially females tend to wait until they're at least 100% to over 100% qualified to apply for a role, whereas white males in particular will apply for a role at roughly 40% of qualifications. So women essentially would get the job more often as long as they were interviewed, because they were way more prepared and overqualified. And whereas men, this is very particular white male, they had actually a lower hire rate, but they always got the interviews. And so the frequency of it. So you can call yourself, maybe someone is recognizing that, hey, we're not seeing enough folks in this minority group. And so that's what we need. I would not classify yourself as a diversity hire because of that. I would say that maybe they recognize it as a weakness and they were trying to correct that weakness, and it really judged them. What did they do when you were there? If you felt like they really worked hard to get sure you had a good experience, then that's a good first step for that organization. That means that they're trying to improve there, right? And you're not taking an opportunity for somebody else. The numbers show that there's just nowhere near. It's not happening. We're at the beginning of equality in these types of opportunities. We're not at the end of it, and so the best thing you can do is you're in the field, that you're talking to a lot of folks here that understand the value of ensuring that there's opportunities for folks who are marginalized. So don't give up, and look for, be selfish in your career growth without stepping on other people, and judge people for how they treat you more than like say that other part there, because this is new for a lot of companies. And yes, there might be a beneficiary where they have other reasons, but all you can do is knock it out the park like you probably did. And what did they say? The most effective trait against racism is simply people working and living together, right? And so you working with them, maybe you uncovered like, oh, it wasn't so bad. Jason, we can hire people like that. Jason was awesome. Why were we so scared? Maybe that's what you did, Jason, for the next guy or gal.
All right, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing your experiences, your knowledge and experiences with us. And a lot of great resources shared in the chat as well. And we'll be sending a follow-up email with, I'll include all the resources that were shared in the chat in that email, and also on Discord and Design Buddies. And right now we're going to do our group photo like we do at every single Design Buddies event. And this is where we post it on our socials and send out the recording to everyone. So I'll count down to 10 seconds and you all can turn on your camera if you would like to be in our group photo. This also posts on our announcements as well. I see some of y'all with a Design Buddies background. I'm happy to see that as well. And as always, with all of our Design Buddies events with tradition, we always do a little group wave afterwards as well. So feel free to grab your plushies if you want to be in our wave. And yeah, I'll count down 5 seconds. And if you want, feel free to keep sharing any resources you find in the chat too about how to be a good ally. And I'll make sure to share them all in the email afterwards too. I'm just save the chat again too. Cool. All right. 5. We're gonna do a group photo first and then a little wave. 5, 4. Keep smiling because I'm gonna do all the pages. 3, 2, 1. Smile. All right. I'm gonna get all the pages. Oops. I think I accidentally muted someone, but all right, cool. We're gonna do our wave for Instagram story. So feel free to wave, dance, dab. This is for Instagram story. Hello, everybody. Thank you all. Oh, sorry, my phone lagged. Let me just do this again. My phone's lagging. Okay, let me quit the app and do it again really quick. Keep waving. Sorry about making you guys wait. My phone's loading Instagram. All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming to our wonderful panel discussion and active allyship and tech with DE&I leaders. See you on Discord and later, everybody, and have a good evening. Cool. All right, that concludes our event. I'm going to stop streaming on YouTube, but thank you all for coming, and hope y'all have a nice day and week. And it's Wednesday, so happy half week, happy almost weekend, I guess, to everyone.
See you guys later.
Bye.